to know why it's showing me my Facebook. Might have to just record. Can you see my screen in any way?
Yes, I can.
You can?
Yes.
You know me, I cannot see it.
The YouTube with the kids. Open them.
Oh, yeah, that's not where you're supposed to see my video. I mean how about now? What do you see now?
You.
Unaona
Just you in the
slide.
background. No.
Eh?
No. No.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, the screen sharing is coming up. Yes.
Okay. Unaona slides now?
Yes. Anxiety, depression.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I will go ahead. This is actually something that I'm also teaching here. So I'll go ahead. Actually, I'll even share this video with my students to watch. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to parent children through anxiety and depression. And we cannot deny the fact that our children are growing up with a lot of anxiety. And of course, depression is also on the rise. We have seen a lot of children commit suicide. A few years ago, I had written a small book called When Your Teen Hurts. I don't know if you can see it. So this book is selling on Amazon. And the reason why I wrote this book, it's really a parent's guide to detect depression and prevent twin suicide. So the reason why I had written this book is because I had encountered a lot of young people that I was mentoring that had attempted suicide or dealing with depression, talking with moms that had lost children that had actually committed suicide. And so I decided to write some of the symptoms that I really heard that the parents had observed, but they really didn't know that they would lead to depression or actually to suicide. Some of the things that the kids said, and of course, combined with research. So that is a book that I wrote. And over the years, I have seen many people say that the book helped them. There's still a lot of questions that, go on. Somebody says, I read the book, I still didn't see these signs. And it is possible. So because a lot of depression signs or suicide symptoms, can mask themselves, especially for children that are quiet. Sometimes we're also too busy to notice them. So I will talk a little bit about how as parents can actually know how to parent children, assuming they are going through depression or assuming they are going through anxiety or even a lot of the stress, because the stress levels are very high. The parents are stressed and the children are stressed. So looking at really like talking, just me personally talking about my childhood, it is very stressful. I'm saying that because a lot of us carry childhood trauma or, stress that we were supposed to deal with when we were younger or we kept dealing with, but we really didn't know how to handle that. I found myself a lot of time as a kid, many times being fearful. I was fearful of a lot of things, common things. So I was my brain was technically left or lived on that flight or fight mode 24/7. I'm going to talk about what flight and fight mode. So our brain, the way God created us, is supposed to be fighting the things that we are fearful of or run away from those things. And it is not every time that you're able to fight. It's not every time that we are able to flee. So what happens is that, our bodies or our brain has to actually handle a lot of events or a lot of situations that threaten our lives. When we were growing up, for anyone that grew up in Kenya or still grows up in Kenya, we were fearful of almost every adult. Our teachers, made us to fear them. Our elders made us to fear them. There wasn't really that much relationship. It was a little bit about a relationship that was fearful, like you're supposed to fear your elders. Not so much of respect, but because at any time they would turn around and spank you, they would turn around and hurt you, or they would turn around and just say something mean. So growing up, I was fearful of injections. I don't know how many times, almost 15 days out of 30 days in a month, I was sick. I am one of those kids that had tonsils growing up. So I was constantly going to the doctor's office. I feared doctor's office because every time I went there because of the tonsils, I got injected. Would be given injections for a week, and I would have to go to back to the hospital. Those are the days that they used to use a very, very huge needle. Used to be boiled. Of course, it was blunt. So most of the time it was very painful. I was very, very fearful, and not just fearful. I developed anxiety towards, the hospital. I would sometimes, even when I would pass through the hospital, see somebody wearing a coat, I would get scared just because I was remembering about the torture that I had to go through that. So my fear, even as growing up, I can say that every part of my dwelling was just a lot of fear. When I think about the ecological model and all the systems on there, starting from your individual home, going to school, your neighborhood, and your relatives' homes, even church was a place where I feared. So this is normally what happened to a lot of children growing up. If you're not spanked growing up, you probably, didn't really enjoy childhood much. Nowadays, the type of fear that our children are going through is totally different from this. Might be similar in certain ways, but let's see how we can actually define things like stress. So before I go that, let me talk about, parents need to know that excessful childhood anxiety is very, very harmful. Our parents know back then? Probably they did, or probably they didn't, because they were not as much educated. We know that some stress is inevitable. Kids have to go through stress no matter what. Exams are very stressful. Doctor's appointments are very stressful. Going for immunization and all that's some of the stress that is inevitable. But and they stress whenever it lasts for a longer time, especially when you cannot flee or fight that stress or whatever stressor is, it develops into anxiety. And if anxiety is not treated, it progresses to depression. And that's what actually even, you hear that, your children actually have suicide ideation. They start talking about, I hate this life. I would rather be dead. I can't go through this. Life is so stressful. And of course, so many other conditions that, because whenever your brain tells your heart to fight, your heart is pumping, your pressure, your rate, your heart rate is also very different. Those things can also actually cause other physiological disorders, and including things like even heart conditions, because your heart is always, whenever you see something scary or whenever you see that stress are coming towards you, when you're thinking about stress, when that anxiety is so high, you're panicking, your blood pressure is not normal, your heart rate is not normal. All those things can actually cause other diseases. So children need to know how to cope, not how to get used to anxiety. I remember, there are times that my children would come home and tell me, Mom, how I feel like I'm being bullied, these kids don't like me. And all I knew to tell them that back then, before I was well exposed or well educated on these matters, I just used to tell them, you just need to get used to it. Just get used. You cannot tell your children to get used to anxiety, because that is what causes a lot of other bad issues. So we need to stop telling our kids to cope with, to get used to stress, to get used to anxiety. What we need to do is actually give them tools for actually dealing with that stress or whatever causes them to be anxious. Parents, can liberate children from excessive fear and anxiety. I believe so. And a lot of times, even as parents, when our children tell us they're stressed, we get stressed. Sometimes, we can just show them that we love them and we care for them and we understand, just validating that they're going through stress rather than just telling them deal with it, because that's a word that we overuse it, deal with it. So our nervous system deals with the anxiety and stress within our bodies, just like I explained what happens whenever you see that stress or whenever you see that scary thing. Like I said, anytime I saw the doctors or I saw the nurses go to, that aluminum thing that they used to pull out the windows, the needles, what happened is the stress. So my body started reacting to that stress. And of course, some of our genes, and especially even the environment that we live in, can also pose a higher risks for our bodies to get stressed or our bodies to get anxious, more than other people, depending on how our genetic makeup is. So excessive anxiety, usually, what the research says is that about 4 to 5 years, children actually start getting very, very retaining that excessive anxiety, because they have started processing the dangerous situations, they have started processing the mean people, they have started even processing some of the things that stress little kids or even adults. So it does. So what happens is that between 4 to 5 years, you'll start hearing the kids saying that I feel stressed, or they will start saying that I'm fearful and things like that. But that stress, if it is not taken care of, if your children don't know how to cope with it, it actually progresses into the teenage years. Remember, what is happening in the teenage years is the adolescent stage. A lot of hormones are going on. And so it is also very hard to regulate stress because of the other hormonal issues that are happening, is because of development. So that stress, usually, it actually launches itself in the child's body when they are in the teenage years, and that's why we have a lot of children stress, a lot of children being diagnosed with with stress-related disorders, a lot of children committing suicide during that age, and of course, depression is also on the rise, starting from teenage years. So, what is the difference between stress and anxiety? Somebody may ask. Stress is usually that external trigger that causes us to actually be anxious. And we know that, when you get stressed and it lasts for a long time, or it persists because you are worrying too much, or you're fearful too much. Usually I give the example of when you are being raised in a home where there's domestic violence, that, your brain is always being triggered to fight because of that worry and that fear. So the stress and anxiety are normal responses, as I said, from the body, because they are the ones that actually, if we don't get stressed, then we are not normal people. We need to be anxious, we need to be stressful. When we see stress, when we see the stressful, especially if you see a fire coming, your body has to react to that. What problem is when that fire is actually always burning and it is stressing you, and your body is actually being unable to cope because of exhaustion. So anyone is prone to anxiety. We carry it with us because we have to. Dangerous situations are supposed to be noticeable, and so what our eyes see, what our ears hear, what our senses actually get into contact with, that message is sent to the brain. We know what the brain does, is the brain that tells your body, now it's time to fight or it's time to flee. So because it has sensed danger. So stress is a response to any threat that is not common to us. And that's why you see when people are used to holding a snake, they don't have a problem with holding that snake for a long time because they're used to. But when you see that snake for the first time, definitely you're going to develop some type of stress to another level, because you are responding to that threat. So it is normal to respond to threat. Stress is short-term. Because it is only supposed to actually stay as long as the threat is noticed. So once you notice it and you acknowledge it and you get used to it, that stress is supposed to leave you. However, not all the time that trigger is identified for the body, and that is actually what constitutes anxiety. So anxiety is a long-term experience. The body is responding to the stress, but the stress has stayed for a long time, so your body gets to become anxious. At times, stress may turn into anxiety because it has stayed for a long time. For example, let's say something like if you have been doing exams for a long time and sometimes you have been failing. So every time you think about an exam, you actually become anxious. That's what you're talking about. The anxiety is internal and not always noticeable, but that's when the kids or somebody starts saying, or your children start saying, Mom, I feel butterflies in my stomach because I'm going to do an exam. Mom, I see butterflies in my stomach because when I think about, the people that bully me in the class, when you put your child in the car, you're taking them to school, and they start thinking about that. They have not really sensed the danger, but they are thinking about that danger. So their body gets tensed, and that is what we are calling anxiety. So when the anxiety stays for a long time, that is a problem. So how many things stress our kids? Man, there are many things that stress our kids. Our children get stressed all the time. We get stressed as human beings all the time. You don't know how many times I get stressed when I go to the road and I'm driving here in Kenya because, I'm going to find somebody who is mean. I'm going to find a driver who is careless. So there's a lot of stress. Anything can be stressful. I mean, using gas and thinking about your food is going to burn can cause you stress. So what the stress does, as we talk about the stressors, children nowadays are stressed over everything. They're stressed over social media. They're not getting likes. They're not getting people follow them. They're stressed over, they're not wearing the Nike shoes to school. They're stressed because their kids are not liking them. They're not talking to them. They're stressed because their parents don't drive a good car. They're stressed because they don't live in a good neighborhood. There are so many stresses. And of course, we add to that stress because we always have a lot of high expectations on our children. So we do add to that stress. So what stress does is that it is actually going to prevent us from sleeping. Think about the time when you were stressed and you could not sleep because you stayed awake worrying, you stayed awake being fearful that something is going to go wrong. We do know that stress does impact your brain. So where it prevents you from sleeping. Sometimes, children want to go to bed later than normal because they want to do on social media, they want to talk to their friends, and of course that adds to stress. That might be a reason why they're not sleeping. That might be maybe they're too stressed, they don't want to go to bed, they are fearful. Maybe there are things that happen when they are asleep. Maybe their parents fight when they're asleep. I remember myself growing up where I used to be very, very stressed during the night time because that's when mostly that we got to experience domestic violence. So there are so many reasons why children would want not to go to sleep early. Sometimes they actually impact each other. So stress can make you not go to sleep. Not going to sleep can actually cause stress in your body. We withdraw from school, church, clubs, social groups. These are symptoms. So kids don't want to go to school. They start saying, Mom, I don't want to go to school. I don't like that school. Don't take me back to that school. For example, like in America, where kids have to report back to school after maybe a whole entire summer, they have been processing this information. They start saying, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. That can be a sign of stress. And that can be a sign that school is a source of stress. Sometimes the kids don't want to go to church. Maybe you're going to a church where these kids are not are seeing people who look like they're bullies. For example, like if you live in a white neighborhood and your children actually go to a school that is dominantly white and they're being bullied by the white kids, who want to tell you that they want to go to school and not church? I mean, they want to go to church and not school. They might actually hate church as well because they think that everybody in church is also supporting them. They're bullies. They want to withdraw out of clubs. Maybe they were in a certain club, maybe 4K club in school. That is a sign of stress. It's actually a sign of depression because what depression actually does is that once the stress is too much, it progresses to depression, and so it actually causes your your children or yourself to actually lose interest. This is what we are calling, part of the brain actually that is supposed to really, help them enjoy. But because of stress, it is actually impacted. Always tired and loss of interest and concentration. They panic a lot. The kids that have a lot of anxiety, they do panic a lot. They're always having panic, even when you're not sure why they're panicking. They're always in a panic mode, and they actually act like it. They scream, they yell, they see something small, they are scared. That is not normal. Unexplained crying and headaches. This actually, it's really a concern. A lot of children, especially teenagers, when they're depressed, when they are really depressed, they talk about headaches a lot, unexplained headache. There's nothing medical that makes them to have the headache, because headaches should be a symptom of a certain disease or exhaustion, but they are constantly having headaches, and because of actually stress. A lot of stress, and especially because when we are in the fight mode, we stress. Actually, we stretch our muscles, we tense them, and of course, those muscles, some of them run through our head, and so they increase the headache. The crying a lot is actually because, children are sad, when they have gone to that place where they cannot control their stressors, they can't handle the anxiety that they have, they cry a lot, because we do know that that's also something. I don't want to use very high technical terms, because I know there are many people listening to this. Loss of appetite and frequent stomach aches that also go with kids that have been exposed to a lot of stress, or actually are going through depression. They complain that they're tired most of the time, because guess what? Stress makes people get tired, because you're exhausted. So you're fatigued. You don't feel like you want to go to class. You're dragging your feet. They don't want to clean their room. It's not because they don't want to clean their room. It's not because they don't want to do their chores, but stress causes that to happen. Hold on, I need to add something. Yeah. Okay, so I need to go back to the next slide. Welcome. What just did I do? Sorry. Okay. I hope you can still see my slides. Can you still see my slide? Okay. Okay. And if you have a question, please, can you ask a question if I am going too fast? So I was talking about how children get tired most of the times. It's because of stress. It's not because they don't want to do homework. Stress makes their bodies, anybody that is stressed, actually, that low mood actually makes your body not want to do anything, and that causes fatigue. And they are also easily irritable. So you might find that you are fighting a lot with your children. Everything that you say, they talk back. And that can also be because they are stressed. They have a lot of stress going on. Imagine when you're tired, even yourself, when you're tired at work, you have been stressed because of your children, your spouse, and things like that. And somebody talks to you, and then you talk back, and you're rude because you're easily irritable. So other signs of anxiety, which actually they go hand in hand with our stress symptoms or depression symptoms. When a child has a lot of anxiety, they're always nervous, they're restless, their bodies are tense, and that we say that also contributes to a lot of unexplained headaches. Sweating. You might find some children that are actually, because they have anxiety, they're trembling, they're shaking. If you see your child showing some of these, especially these symptoms, especially when you're dropping them off to school, you're supposed to know that there is something that is actually, there's danger in that school. That danger could be a bully, a child that bullies them, always in panic and senses danger easily. So anything small is going to make them panic or jump or actually cry. Hyperventilation is something that we know that somebody is breathing very fast. If you are a nurse, you can do their heart rate. You can actually see that their heart is beating very, very fast. That's a sign of anxiety. Increased heart rate. We talked about that, our physiological, part of the body, how it reacts to stress and danger. Feeling fatigued, exhausted without a reason. They haven't worked. They haven't done any chores. They haven't done too much work at school, but they are always saying, Mom, I'm exhausted. Mom, I can't do my homework. Unable to concentrate or think rationally. So they don't think very well. So it's very important when your child is actually driving themselves to school and you notice that they are very anxious, you actually drop them off to school rather than them driving, because also that level of thinking, and rational thinking is actually impacted by stress and anxiety. Okay, so there are many types of anxiety, very, very many types. And you might see that, even the symptoms vary, but they're not too much. Symptoms, most of the symptoms actually crisscross. So there's something that, we call agoraphobia, however you want to say it. That's how it's spelled. It is a type of anxiety disorder in which you fear and often avoid places or situations that might cause you to panic and make you feel trapped, helpless, or embarrassed. So when this is something that usually diagnosed a lot with the children that are going through bullying. So they want to avoid the place where they are being bullied or where they are being embarrassed, especially children that have heavy weight or children of color. When they want to avoid that place, and it actually turns out to be a phobia. So even driving by that school, because it causes them to be very anxious and it causes them panic, they don't want to go near it. So sometimes we want to force our kids to do things that they don't want to do. We want them to go and present a song in front of other people, but they are showing symptoms of anxiety that would be very unfair to force them to do it, because if it causes that type of disorder, then you have to make sure that you protect your child from exposing them to more danger. So the anxiety disorder due to a medical condition, which includes intense anxiety or panic that are directly caused by a physical health problem. So sometimes you might have, a child that has other physical issues, and this is one of the other things that actually they can develop. Generalized anxiety disorder, of course, persistent high anxiety and worry about activities. Those are some of the symptoms. Student worry due to ordinary routine issues. For example, you're telling your child to do homework and they are showing a lot of worry and they're panicking and they have anxiety. Tell them to clean up. So that would be under this category of generalized or GAD. They worry, the worry becomes out of proportion and difficult to control, which actually might impact them, how they reason, how they do things even physically. They might actually even faint. It affects how they feel physically. Often occurs along with other anxiety disorders or depression. So GAD might actually be one of the things that people might confuse with depression. I'm gonna mute somebody because I hear something going on when I'm speaking. So I hope I did that. Muted somebody. Okay. So the next one is social anxiety disorder. This one's actually, I've also noticed a lot of these cases even here in Kenya. So the social phobia. Most of the time, students that are very introvert, they might actually have symptoms of social anxiety disorder. Students that don't like to interact with a lot of people a lot, because they like they just like their loner space. And you take them to school, that actually might develop into social anxiety disorder, because they have that social phobia, but they are going to this environment where there's a lot of people. The teachers are calling out their names. The teachers want them to come in front. They don't want to be noticed. So actually, how they actually display some of those symptoms are high levels of anxiety. they fear and avoid social situations. So they don't want to go to church, they don't want to go to school, or due to feelings of embarrassment. So they are self-conscious and concerned about being judged or viewed negatively by others. This is something that can actually, remember that in adolescent stage, we usually say that egocentrism is very, very high. So that can also be confused because of the teenage years, where, when that the egocentrism, we talk about how the adolescent think that everybody's looking at them, everybody's gonna laugh at them. So a lot of us got to go through that stage, but we overcame or we outgrew that stage. So if it doesn't outgrow and the child is still feeling embarrassed and avoiding, that might have been actually progressed to social anxiety disorder. Specific phobias, of course, characterized by major anxiety when you're exposed to a specific object or situation and a desire to avoid it. Phobias provoke panic attacks in some people. So we know that people might have a specific phobia for, high weight, high height, might have phobia for elevators, might have phobia for, spiders. So when the phobia is actually disrupting somebody's daily life, because even when I have a phobia for heights, I can still function, but if they don't function, then that might be, actually that's when you use DSM-5 to diagnose those other phobias so that you can treat them. And there's not a lot of medication that we recommend for those. We know that we can use CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to help some of these children to overcome some of those phobias. Selective mutism is consistent failure of children to speak in certain situations, such as school, even when they can speak in other situations, such as at home, with close family members. So we are looking at the word selective. So selective and the word mutism. So from the word mute, like I have muted you guys, you can speak in the Zoom, but when you are out of the Zoom, you can talk. So what I'm saying is that is selective mutism. So they don't want to talk at home, they want to talk at school. They don't want to talk at school, they want to talk at home. So that's selective mutism. And it's something that can actually be dealt with through therapy. Because it can interfere with school. So can you imagine if your children say mute themselves when they're in school and they're supposed to present for a grade, or they mute themselves when they're supposed to be interviewing for a scholarship? So that's something that can be handled through therapy. Separation anxiety disorder is when a childhood disorder characterized by excessive anxiety that does not match the development level and related to separation from parents or others who have parental roles. So it's okay for children to have separation anxiety, but now it becomes a disorder when it is actually very excessive. If you are leaving a 1-year-old kid in the classroom, they might show that separation anxiety. But if they are 10-year-old and you're dropping them off in school, you have been dropping them off in school, the same school, and they're still exhibiting the same behavior, then that could be separation anxiety disorder, if that makes sense. So it doesn't match their age, the anxiety symptoms that they're showing for separation. The panic disorder, repeated episodes of sudden feelings of intense anxiety and fear or terror that peak within minutes. So when somebody gets that to where they actually develop panic attacks, we know all about the panic attacks, how sometimes somebody faints, of course, that anxiety and that stress and whatever happens in the body, that the oxygen stops going into the brain and to where somebody actually faints, because they are really, really, really anxious. So that is intense anxiety. Feelings of doom about to happen, shortness of breath, chest pain or rapid fluttering or pounding heart. So your heart is really beating very fast. That is intense panic or anxiety. The panic attacks may lead to worrying about them happening again or avoiding situations in which they have occurred. So if you have fainted in your classroom, you might not want to return to that classroom as a child, because you'll be embarrassed or you think that it's going to happen again. So that's panic disorder. Substance-induced anxiety disorder for children that have actually used some drugs are known to cause some withdrawal symptoms that actually now could cause the substance-induced anxiety disorder. Intense anxiety or panic that are directly related to misusing drugs, taking medication, or being exposed to a toxic substance, for example, like heavy metals and things like that. So people might develop those. Other specified anxiety disorder and unspecified anxiety disorder terms for anxiety or phobias that do not meet exact criteria for any other anxiety disorders, but are significant enough to be disruptive and distressing. So a child gets really, really stressed. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to do their homework. They actually don't even want to eat, and all those type. They don't match all the other disorders, so that's why they are being called unspecified anxiety, or they might be specific because it's for certain situation. Remember that it's not every anxiety becomes a disorder or that is diagnosed. It is if it is too distressing and it is disrupting one's normal living. Anxiety disorder risk factors. So who are likely to have some of these disorders that we'll be talking about? Because it's not everybody that is going to see a spider and actually panic or have a panic attack. It's not everybody that is actually going to be fearful of situations or fearful of their classmates or fearful of big crowds. But there are some risk factors that actually causes some of us to have that excessive anxiety that actually leads to the disorder. So children that have gone through a lot of trauma or have witnessed trauma, probably through abuse or witnessing other people fight, especially parents, or have witnessed somebody be killed and things like that, those that have really had very traumatic childhood or experiences are at risk of developing the anxiety disorders that we are talking about. Adults who experience a traumatic event also can develop anxiety disorders. We know all this about people who come from war, when they come from Iraq or wherever they have gone to serve, and they almost all the types of the disorders that we've talked about because of whatever traumatic experiences they went through. They saw somebody being killed, they stepped on a bomb or things like that. They blew on their friend's face and things like that. So they are going to have those type of disorders, even though they did not have those disorders before the event happened. So stress due to an illness, health condition, or serious illness may cause significant worry about issues such as your treatment and your future. So for example, if you go to a hospital and they diagnose with you they diagnose you with a terminal illness, that illness that you really know that has killed a lot of people. We know that people are getting panic attacks, even those anxiety disorders just from being told that they have COVID because they saw someone die. We do know that these things that can be related to illness. Stress pile up, when you have a lot of stress, build up. Small stressors build up, they become huge, excessive. They can cause excessive anxiety. For example, if you have a family member that died, and then you have work stress, you're going through a marital issue, your children are not obeying you and things like that. So all those can pile up, including school. Going to school can also add to that stress pile up. So these are risk factors that actually help in manifestation of anxiety disorders that we are talking about. Your personality also is a big thing. I don't know how many times you do personality tests when you are diagnosing people with certain disorders, because your personality, again, is what really tells us whether you like crowds, whether you don't like crowds. There's something that we call the OGEN. N stands for neuroticism. People who rate very, very high on neuroticism are very, very likely to actually develop these disorders. Most of them are the people that worry a lot, people that like to be angry a lot, complain a lot, and things like that. So they are always fearing. So their body is always tense. Other mental health disorders, people with other mental health disorders, including depression, might also develop anxiety disorders. Having blood relatives with certain anxiety disorders can also, it runs in the family. That's what we usually say. So it can also be a risk factor. If you're using drugs or alcohol, it's also something. And we have seen that especially when young people that have had, certain disorders, even anxiety, panic attack, and they start using drugs, actually, it becomes, worse. And of course, we know misuse or withdrawal of certain substances actually can cause or worsen the anxiety. Okay. So the other medical issues that are linked to anxiety disorders, like diabetes, thyroid problems, such as hyperthyroidism, heart disease, drug and alcohol abuse and withdrawal, respiratory disorders. All these are some of the diseases that could also be linked to anxiety disorders in such a way that if you have this disease, you are more likely to suffer from anxiety disorders that we talked about, chronic pain or irritable bowel syndrome, rare tumors that produce certain fight or flight hormones, withdraw from certain medications. So these ones can impact each other. That's what you usually say, like it is two-way. So it can either be linked to, it can be a risk factor, and they can also go hand in hand, So you as a parent, what is your role after the information that I gave you is really background. I wanted you to have that background so that you can know that whenever you are confronted by a child that is probably going through depression or the anxiety is very, very high, so that you don't just pinpoint one factor, that could be causing some of these disorders. It's easy for us to pinpoint, especially children who have used alcohol or drug, and blame on their behavior without remembering that all these other factors could also cause them to have the mental illness or the mental disorders. So your child is your responsibility. So you need to respond to them whenever they need you to respond. I know that, I don't know how to stress that enough, but I know that college, high school is a very, very stressful time. Being available to your children so that you can respond to them whenever they need you. My children call me, even when I'm in bed, something is stressing them, they're fighting with their roommate. I'm there to listen. I'm there to try and be the person that listens, because if no one else is listening, they need a parent that listens or a sibling that listens. So listening to your child is very, very important, because you are not just giving them an ear, you're also actually validating that something is happening. The worst thing that you can do, especially with mental illness, is really ignore what the child is trying to communicate. So let's raise our children well, knowing that they can run to us when the world is very, very harsh to them. They have a place to run to. They have a mommy, they have a daddy they can call and tell them somebody is being mean to them, a professor is being mean, a professor is being a racist, or things like that, because the world can really, really be harsh. We know that very well, especially for those who are raising their children in America or a place where racism is high. If your kids struggle, make sure that you value them regardless of whether they have made mistakes. Just tell them you value them. Don't value them less because of their behavior, because remember, they are still your children. They're still your children. So that behavior that you don't like, that is what you need to tackle together. But still value your child, regardless of whether they have disappointed you, regardless of whether they didn't get the grades you wanted them to get, whether their GPA is low, whether they didn't get a scholarship. Let them know that you value them regardless. You are their custodian. Treat them like their maker would want you to treat them. You remember, those children belong to who? They belong to God. They are your children, yes, but you're giving them they were given to you by God, because God knew that you would be the best parent. So whatever you have to do, treat your children right. And of course, we want them to know that they should respect their mommies and daddies, but treat them well. How much do you love your child? How much do we love our children? Please know that everyone, including your child, needs love. Yeah, we always say that we want to be loved. Sometimes we feel like we are not loved enough to love our children, but we have to try and love our children regardless. Sometimes it is their daddies that have unloved us, their daddies have mistreated us. And I know that there, I've talked a lot about that spillover effect, that I felt like it always was actually a hindrance to how I connected with my mom, because, if she didn't feel loved by her husband, sometimes it is very easy for a human being to feel that way. I'm not going to love your children because you don't love me. You're treating me badly. I'm not going to treat your children bad. But let's not have our children be the reason, our marriages or whatever is happening outside be the reason why our children actually commit suicide or get depressed because mom is not feeling like she's loved. Let's give them love regardless. Tell your children how much you love them daily, on a daily basis. Send them a text, call them. Sometimes they don't like to answer, they like to text message. Just text them, send them a love message, send them a quote, send them a Bible verse, but remind them that you love them. Let them know how much you value them. As I said again, I can't stress that point enough. Regardless, all children are worthy of a parent's love. They were given to us by God. I am repeating that because it is important. Teach them how to confront their anxiety and fear using God's promises. As I said, send them Bible verses. If they say that they are fearful, if they say they have some type of anxiety because maybe there's a big test coming, maybe they have to do some kind of evaluation at work, maybe they are going to do their driver's test, whatever it is, send them some Bible verses that tell them how to deal with that anxiety. We know that so a lot of them want to be untouched when they go to college, but the word of God will remain the same. I usually send Bible verses to my children, and now they also know how to send those Bible verses to me when I'm stressed. So these are just examples of some of the Bible verses that you can use to encourage your children. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That is addressing anxiety. It is addressing everything that makes them worry, everything that they feel like they can't handle. All they need to do is surrender it to God. Cast your cares onto the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. The good thing I like about the Google is that you can Google an encouraging verse. You can Google an anxiety verse. If your child says, if they feel like they're anxious and they're acting like they're anxious because they're calling you mom like 10 times on the phone and you can't answer because at your work, know your child is anxious. Google that verse, copy it and paste it on the text message and send it to them. You don't know how much God can use these words, because He does. He has used these words several times on myself even. Sometimes my child, would call me, especially when the COVID was very bad. She would call me. She said, Mom, I feel like I'm dying. Mom, I feel like I'm not breathing well. And I'll just pray. I'll pray with them. I'll read the verse of God that encourages them. And the next time they're texting, they're saying, oh, Mom, I feel better. Sometimes it's not even that they felt better, but just the words of encouragement that you told them and assured them just made them feel better, because we can't be able to actually take away the stress that our children have. All we can do is be supportive and be there to give them the resources that they need. So one of the other things that I really found very important when talking with children that are going through stress or anxiety is really having that secure relationship with their parents. And I say that again, if they are secure, they will tell you everything that is stressing them. If they feel secure in your relationship, parent-child relationship, that was actually my master's degree thesis. When I was doing my thesis, it was actually about parent-child relationship and how open the children can be, and how that relationship can really help children navigate their personal relationships, their personal problems, if they have a secure relationship with their parent or another adult with their guardian, because they will tell you everything that broke their heart. They will tell you how a boy broke their heart. They will tell you how a professor did this wrong thing. They will tell you how they feel scared. because you have a secure relationship. If they trust you, they will call you when they are stressed. They won't keep that stress to themselves, because the worst thing that we can do is to allow children to keep that stress within themselves that they're not letting out, because just like a balloon, when it is actually overpumped, it's gonna break. They get a breaking point, and that's what we call the mental breakdown. When the children actually now they're too stressed, they can't deal, they have a mental breakdown. And most of the times a mental breakdown can be fatal, because a mental breakdown can mean end my life. And we don't want that to happen. So we will teach our children how to cope with challenging situations. We won't teach them to avoid those challenging situations, because they will be there. Challenging situations are everywhere. That's what we live in, a world that is so chaotic. So challenging situations are there. We need to give them tools to cope with them. Remember, you don't have to be the one actually stressing your child. They get stressed out there from all sorts of, I don't know, source. So school is a stressor, peer pressure is a stressor, bullying is a stressor, work is a stressor. Some of our kids work and they have to go to school. Sometimes they have to pay their bills, that's a stressor. Sometimes they're worried about their grades, because we have always told them that their grades matter more than their lives, but that should not be the narrative. We need to tell our kids, even without a 4.0 GPA, my daughter, you're still doing good, you're in college, that's all I care about. They will call mom or dad to ask for advice or someone to listen to them without making them dependent on you. So even if your children are calling them, it doesn't mean that they are dependent. It doesn't mean that they are clingy. It doesn't mean that they're bothering you. Just, you still have to tell them, you're an adult. This is how you need to handle these things, but let them call you. I want my children to know that I'm dependable. I want them to know that I'm a shoulder to cry on. Help them build other meaningful relationships. So as we guide them through how to maneuver this stress, because we are not always going to be there. Sometimes you might not pick up a call. So they need to build other relationships, meaningful relationships, but that's part of growth, part of maturity. So if they can reach me, they can reach an auntie, they can reach another person, maybe a family friend, they can reach their priest, pastor or their priest, they can reach their youth leader. So helping them build those meaningful relationships that they can actually also become resourceful when they need someone, when they are going through that stress or anxiety. And of course, I say it again, they need to be validated. I don't want to ever tell my child you're overreacting, because I don't want to use those words when sometimes we do, because that's what we were told. You're overreacting, you're crying without no reason, I'm going to beat you so that you can cry. When a child is crying, they're crying because there's a reason. So you need to validate that. There's pain somewhere. Say, I know you hurt. Tell me what is hurting you. I know you hurt. Tell me how I can help you, how I can support you so that you can go through this. Don't try to tell your child that you're pretending, you're acting, you want attention. Those are the words that I don't want you to use. And I've told those many times. Every time I've done a video on stress and anxiety and suicide and things like that, please validate. When your child is going through hurt, just like us, if you're going through something miserable, you want somebody else to acknowledge that you're going through something hard, and you want them to be supportive. So let's be supportive to our children as well, not ignore. So how do we treat anxiety? So the most recommended way, of course, is therapy. Children may have more than one anxiety based on what they are exposed to, and it is very, very harmful. That's what I said. If it's long-term, it's going to destroy your children's organs, your children's health, because you know that, most of you that are in medical health, you know that too much stress. If your child is exposed to too much stress, it can even cause cancer because of, all those cortisol, that there are toxins that are released in your body because of stress. So we do recommend child-focused CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. It is recommended for treatment. Rarely do you hear me talk about medication unless it is inevitable. Yes, it is child-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, but we want to make sure that we involve the parents when we are going through this type of therapy. You can't treat a child that actually has a parent by themselves, especially when they're going through panic, when they're going through anxiety, when they're going through any type of mental illness, whether it is alcoholism, whether it is addiction, whatever it is, you have to involve another person that can actually act as a guide, as a parent, because guess what? When that child is going through that stress, most likely the parent is also going through the stress. The parent is not sleeping, the parent is worried, the parent is always thinking that their child might harm themselves, the parent is thinking, oh, my child who drinks a lot might actually crash with a car, something like that. So you have to actually provide that support. So if your child is going through type of depression and they're going to see a counselor, maybe you can recommend that you go to counseling together, that you have that family group therapy or something like that, so that you can walk this journey together. Because whatever your child is going through, you're probably feeling twice or double, because that is your child and you hurt when they hurt. Medication is recommended, but we do know that when kids don't use medication, they get away from medication, because we don't want the child to use medication for life. They can relapse just like any other. We know that there's some medication that is over the counter that can be recommended, but anxiety medication, or even depression, or even that antidepressant, we know that they also have other side effects that can also be very, very fatal. We know that there are some medicine that are connected, depression medicine that are actually connected to suicide rates. So children have, or teenagers start to have suicidal thoughts because of the side effect of the medication. The antidepressant actually make the children, the mood go sometimes very low, and when it is very, very low, that is the time most of the times they feel hopeless and they can end their life. So you have to be careful about the medication. Read about medication, research about medication. There's a lot of medication that have been, has been removed, like Prozac, from shelves because of the suicide rate. Kids need to learn to be resilient, and that's what I really, really stress on. That instead of putting our children on medication, instead of solving their problems, we teach them to be resilient. Of course, resilience topic is another day because it's lengthy, but they need to know how to handle those challenges. Give them the tools, because we have to tell them, you know what, stress is going to be there, but how you bounce back and how quickly you bounce back is what really resilience is all about. If you can be able to go back to not necessarily the original state before the stressor came, that is very good. At least be close to where you were before, so you can bounce back. Don't remain there stressed, depressed, because that's what is actually very, very bad, dangerous. Kids need to not to escape the challenges. We don't want to say, oh, because your school is so stressful, I'm going to transfer you and take you to another school where there's no bullying. Yes, you can do that if you know that it's not working. You have actually tried everything else. Your teachers are not working with you. Your child's health is in danger. It is recommended that you move your child, but you can't move your child forever. So we have to make sure that we teach them how to manage some of those situations. Emotional intelligence comes from training. So as we are training our children to be resilient, we are training them how to control their emotions. We are teaching them self-control. We are teaching them how to be confident. We are teaching them how to communicate their emotions. Instead of crying, they can actually use words. Instead of using drugs, they can actually reach out for help when they are stressed. So that is what emotional intelligence is all about. That's also another topic for another day, but it is known, or according to research, the children that actually are emotionally intelligent, they are not likely to commit suicide. They are not likely to suffer depression. They actually bounce back very easily or very fast. And that is so for everybody, any age, even adults. Emotional intelligence is very, very important. I have been talking for the last, I don't know how many minutes. But I'm almost done. If you have any question, you can put it in the chat and I'll answer after this. Okay. So what I said, maybe some of the words that some of the things that I'm going to say again is that parents should avoid, these are do not overparent your child. Let your child be your child. Let your child be themselves. Let them learn. Let them fail. Let them wake up. Let them not wake up. Let them miss class. Let them fail a cat. It's okay. Don't overparent your child. Don't try to do things for them. Don't try to push them too much. Overprotecting your children, like, you are shielding them from every stressor. You can't do that, because then they will not build the skills that they need to deal with those hard situations. Teach them how to solve conflict positively, because telling them to avoid or protecting them from conflict is not going to help them. Don't overassure your child. It actually worsens anxiety and allows the anxiety to last longer. As in over reassuring, like, for example, like if your child called you and they say they fought with their boyfriend, and then you keep reassuring them and saying it's normal, it's not going to happen again, that he probably made a mistake, it's going to work out. Don't do all that. Just assure them for what is normal, but over reassuring. What if that relationship doesn't work out? So then it's going to worsen the anxiety. They won't trust you long. They won't trust you for any other time they want to come back. So just tell them, it might work out, it might not work out. So it's okay to tell them, you know what, maybe that boyfriend was not meant for you. It's okay to say those words, but just reassuring them that they will never fight again, it's not going to work. Dreaming for your kids. How many of us Kenyan parents dream for our kids? We want them to be the doctor we never became. We want them to be the pilot we never became. We want them to get all the scholarships that we never got. Don't dream for your kids. Give them the tools to dream for themselves. Tell them, you know what, this country has all these opportunities. I will guide you. I'll get you a career guide. I will give you all the books to read about careers. I want you to shadow many careers, but don't dream for them, because guess what? As soon as they go on their own and you're not there to dream for them, they will stop dreaming and they'll never dream, and they will be failing, because then you're going to say they have failed you. So do not dream for your kids. Give them the wings to fly to wherever they want. If you want them to become a doctor and they go change their career, like my daughter did in the middle of her degree, that's okay. That's okay too. Let them say, Mom, I don't really think that I'm going to be a doctor. It's okay. It's well and good. How many times have we changed our careers ourselves? Don't over-direct. So don't over-direct. Like, for example, if you have a child and you keep saying, I have done that many times myself when I'm teaching my kids to drive, and we know that we can actually give too many directions. That's what you're talking about, over-directing. Too many directions, excessive directions. Instead of actually easing on the anxiety, they actually make your child more anxious, because now you give them too many directions, they are confused. You are kind of like, those overreacting, overprotective parents, over-criticize, expecting perfection in chores or behavior. Oh my goodness. Who is perfect except Jesus? We cannot expect our children to be perfect. We cannot expect them to do chores 100% how we expected them. We can't expect that all dishes will be rinsed. We can't expect that every time we go to their bedroom, their beds will be made. We cannot do that, and we cannot criticize because they didn't do it perfectly. That is something that will actually manifest a lot of anxiety, because even when they go out there, they'll be thinking that you're looking over their shoulder. When they're doing a test, they're anxious. Mom is going to see that I'm not writing good. I'm not having a good handwriting. So they're going to panic more because of that over-criticizing. Don't choose what they become. Do not choose what they become, okay? Avoid choosing what they become. As I said in the career guide them. Give them the tools, give them options, let them choose what they want to become. Punish kids for grades. Oh my gosh. I don't know how many times I got punished for grades, and I don't know how much that caused stress. When you're going to do any exam, you're thinking about how you're going to be punished. When you think, when you're too stressed and too anxious, you can't even remember anything. So by the time you're going to do that exam, you have forgotten everything because you're too stressed. If you fail, you're going to be punished. And then when they come home, they'll be punished more because they actually forgot everything, and they forgot because of stress, because of thinking about the punishment. So don't punish your kids for grades. Please don't. Please don't. Don't raise your children how you were raised. Set unrealistic goals for them. Oh my goodness, how many times have I done that? I am guilty. Do not set unrealistic goals for themselves. Just like you cannot, we talk about the SMART goals. The goals are supposed to be realistic. If you want to tell them that they need to climb, a ladder, if you can't climb that ladder, most likely they will not climb it. And when they are younger, they might actually not climb as higher or as faster as you are. So those unrealistic goals, again, please avoid them. Pushing kids to attend just certain schools. Man, we want them to go to Ivy College. We want them to go to the University of Nairobi. We want them to go to Harvard. We want them to go to Princeton. We want them to go to everywhere that we didn't go. Setting, pushing. Push them to do engineering. Yes, I went to this college that my parents told me to go. This is really not my potential. So I am going to fail and I'm going to be disappointed. So they get very stressed, and then you end up losing your child. You don't have a child with a degree, and you don't have a child alive because they actually committed suicide because of the stress and the pushing, and they thought that they were going to be a disappointment. So instead of coming home, you get them home, you get them from their school, and they have already killed themselves because of stress, too much stress. Okay, so this is really retaliation, because I've already talked about these things. Parents should ensure that kids have chores, but encourage them self-driven chores. So yes, we want our children to do ABCD before we leave home, but you know what? Encourage them to find out what they can also do in the house. Like my child now, I empowered my daughter to, when she finds that the carpet in the house is not necessary, she can rip it off and she can put whatever she wants. Those are type of self-driven chores I'm talking about. If they want to bake, let them bake. Maybe they'll bake and they'll never bake again because the cake is not going to be as good. It's going to burn. So yes, give them chores, guide them on what they can do, clean up after themselves, but not always just writing everything down. Yes, we want structure, but some type of structure can also be stressful. Communicate with your kids when you're not on your phone and when you're not watching TV. So have that routine where you all put your phones down so that you can look on each other's eye and actually have that one-on-one conversation. It's very, very important. You will know that your child is stressed. You will know that your child is going through depression. You will know that your child is going through rejection at school when you look at them in their eye. Motivate kids to set goals for themselves and offer support. Encourage self-efficacy. Encourage self-efficacy. Not mommy feeling, oh, you're every detail, like you're applying to open a bank account, mom has to do it. You're applying to go to college, mom has to do it. Teach them, encourage them to be efficient on their own and to depend on themselves. Tell them it is okay to start in a communication college, in a community college, by the way. They don't have to start in a state university. They don't have to, they can start with an associate degree or a diploma and still make it. Some of us, that's why we started. I had a diploma and I have a PhD. Who said that you can't go to college because you can't reach your academic goal or actualization because you did not start from a Harvard school or a state university? Nobody. So if your children are not doing well in high school, it's okay if they just, and even if they are too stressed to go to a big college, let them go to a community college. And this is something that I have said over and over, and tell them it's okay even if they don't make a 4.0 GPA. Encourage children to voice their fears. Focus on your child's positive behavior. You're not going to ignore the negative behavior, but if you focus on the positive behavior, they will know that that is what mom focuses on, and they will actually do more of positive things rather than every small thing they did wrong. You are pinpointing, your hair's not looking good, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. Focus on the more positive behavior. We call it positive behavior support, PBS. Parents should ensure coping strategies. Okay, so if your children have, let's say you have done everything possible, and your children are still showing symptoms of anxiety, your children are still showing symptoms of stress, there are some coping strategies that you can actually help them develop for themselves so that they can be able to calm themselves if you're not there, if they're not in your house, if they went to college, if they went to high school and they're stressed. Coping strategies like mindfulness, meditation, listening to calm music, because some of the music sometimes can also cause stress. Just that calm music, meditation, yoga, breathing. We do the box breathing where you breathe in, you hold, you breathe out, and then you relax. So box breathing, the one you do for 4 seconds or 5 seconds, teach them how to calm themselves, because if they are facing that type of fear and they are actually feeling anxious, they should be able to actually calm their bodies so that they don't get panic attack and they don't actually, behave in a way that they can harm themselves. Okay, so of course exercise is important. Encourage them to join clubs, encourage them to join groups that are not going to lead them to harmful behaviors. Go to church, be a youth group member. Don't force them if they don't want to. Seek therapy help if their symptoms persist. If their symptoms are consistent and your child is constantly stressed and showing anxiety and all those symptoms that we talked about, please seek therapy. Seek a counselor that is trained, that can actually help your child maneuver their stress or their stressors. Because as we said, the more stress stays in their body, the more stress is unattended, the more harmful it becomes. So help your children learn skills that deal with things like bullying, if they're rejected, if they get a rejection letter from a college or a scholarship, how they're going to deal with it. How you deal with it is how they're going to deal with it. If you scream, if you yell at people, if you throw tantrum, if you're banging doors, they're probably going to do like you. So just make sure that you're also you're actually also, being a good example. So, because the children will learn from you. Create opportunities for your kids to interact with other peers and not isolate them. Children that are experiencing stress or depression or those type of anxiety, like the social anxiety disorders, they want to stay by themselves, but you want to encourage them not to do that. Okay. So teach your children coping mechanisms. Teach kids how to cope, not to cope for them. So don't do the coping for them. Let them cope. Parents are supposed to intervene for their children, not solve stressful issues. And some of this is really repetition, but I really wanted to make to hit the point home. Make sure you acknowledge what they are going through. I said about validation, support them to maneuver stressors, help your children build resources, let them have resources, including having the number that they call when they feel like they want to end their life. It is very, very, very important to have that. 1-800-273-TALK is the number that we usually give to people in the US if they feel like they are coming to the end of life and they can't get mommy or daddy on the phone. That is a crisis number that they call. Okay? Help them. Make sure your children know they are safe in your company and in your home so that they can run home if the world reject them. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope that you who attended or those who are watching online, if you have questions, I will definitely answer. So let me see if there's a question here. Is it possible the negative environment at home can trigger some of these issues? Yes, Priska, yes, and yes, and yes. I think it's because you joined us late. I started by talking about the home environment. When you talk about the ecological model, you talk about your child being in that home. That is where they were born. that is the first place where children actually start sensing stress. The domestic violence in the home, how you solve conflicts with your partner, if you're fighting, if the older siblings are fighting, if people are yelling, if their needs are not being met, if they're having to cry for them to be served, and things like that. So the tension that is in the home, if your parents work in a very stressful environment, they can actually bring that stress home, and the children will start getting that stress and becoming anxious, just building up from their parents feel overstressed. So yes. And a lot of times when parents are angry, they actually project the anger to their kids. When the parents are stressed, they project that stress to the wrong people. So I think that is the end. Unless somebody wants to unmute themselves and say something, I am done. Anybody wants to unmute themselves and say something? Or ask a question or comment? My mouth is full with many words, but I really enjoyed this session tonight. And I hope that you spread the word. We can support our children, go through stressful events, and protect and prevent some of the suicides that we are seeing all over the world amongst young people. And I'm needed to say that very recently that my daughter lost her best friend through suicide. And that really, hit me hard, knowing that I knew this child and I didn't know that she was going through stress. So stress is not something that writes on the face. It's something that you really have to interact with somebody and know what is going on. So asking your child if everything is okay, if they feel sad, if they feel stressed, it's okay to ask those words. It's really, really okay, especially if you notice some of that behavior that you talked about. Sawa sawa? All right. Kwaheri ya kuonana. Bye, the people that are watching online, the YouTube, God bless you for coming. Kwaheri.